Welcome to section 2, how to truly know yourself. So this is where we get down to business and where you start to gain a high level of self-awareness. And in this section, you'll learn about what your values are, the questions to ask and answer in order to start knowing yourself on a deeper level, the big 5 personality traits and roughly where you stand against each of these, whether you are generally introverted, extroverted or an ambivert and why it matters. And in general terms, you'll also learn more about who you really are. Lecture 4. What are your values? So I'd like to begin section 2 by helping you to learn what your values are. Because in the same way that I believe knowing yourself is the foundation of happiness, I believe that knowing your values is the foundation of knowing yourself. And so that's why we're going to start with actually trying to learn what your values are. And the online Oxford Dictionary describes values as principles or standards of behaviour, one's judgment of what is important in life. And I think that's a really good definition, because when you think about what your values are, I want you to think about them in terms of principles or standards of behaviour, or in terms of generally what's important to you in your life. And some useful questions to ask yourself in order to help you figure out what your values are could be things like, what are the most important things in the world to you? More specifically, what are the most important things in the world to you in terms of happiness and fulfillment? You can also ask yourself, in the big picture of your life, what do you most care about? What sort of things do you put above everyone and everything else? And the kind of answers that you come up with to these questions are your values. And figuring out your values and knowing what they are really is the starting point of knowing yourself. And I want you to shortly start thinking about what your own values are, but firstly I want you to check out some examples of values below, just to get you in the right mindset and to get you into the right zone for this exercise. So here's a list of some possible values. It's very important to understand that this is just a small selection of hundreds of possibilities. So don't choose from this list. It's very important that you think about what your values are. It's got to be very specific to you. Only you really know. But some possible examples, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but I'll just pick out a few from the list. We've got things like adventure, certainty, compassion, family, freedom, friendship, health, independence, kindness, learning, optimism, productivity, security, teamwork, understanding, wealth, winning. But as I said, this is just some random examples just to give you an idea as to what I mean by values. Because remember, we're talking about principles or standards of behaviour, or indeed, just in general terms, what's really important to you in your life on that macro scale. In terms of the big picture of life, what is really important to you in order to be happy and fulfilled. To help you a bit more with this, I'll happily share with you what my values are. So my values are travel and adventure, health and well-being, family and close friends, self-improvement, freedom to live life on my own terms, and competition. And the reason they are my values is quite simply because they are the most important things in my life. When I live my life according to those values, I'm very happy and very fulfilled. I love travel and adventure. It's very important to me in my life. And that doesn't mean I need to be going on holiday all the time, but it does mean that I need some kind of adventure in my life in order to be happy. Now that adventure might be a holiday, but it could also be a hike close to home, it could be a walk in the woods just from my house, it could be climbing a tree when I'm out on a walk, but it can also even be things like having a night out somewhere different. Even that feeds the adventurous side of me. Health and well-being is also incredibly important to me. I'd probably go as far as saying that health and well-being to me is my number one value. It's my top value. It's the thing I put above everything and everyone else, because I know that without my health, I'm nothing. I can't go on adventures if I'm not healthy. I can't be there for my family and close friends if I'm not healthy. And by the way, I mean physically and mentally healthy. Family and close friends, also very, very important to me. Self-improvement. I actually figured out through a lot of the processes that I'm going to share with you that self-improvement in itself is really important to me. In other words, if I'm not improving myself, I'm less happy. I need to be improving myself in order to maximize my happiness. I also love freedom to live life on my terms, which is why I don't like jobs where I've got a boss breathing down my neck. And I love competition, but that can come in many different forms. That's not just competing against other people, it's also competing with myself. And the fact is, when you live your life based on your values, in other words, when you live your life through your values, using your values as the basis for all your decisions and goals and everything you do in terms of hobbies and experiences, you're just going to be very happy. Happiness will pour into your life. And the great thing about your values is that they can be used to guide your behaviour, almost like a personal code of conduct. Now, in terms of the number of values to have, obviously we're only thinking about your top values here, because by the way, there's loads of things in life that are very important to us. You might notice that money is not on my list, but of course money is very important to me, and I'm very conscious that I need money to some extent to be able to go on travel and adventures. So I need some money in order to be able to actually fulfill some of my values. But the fact is, money in itself is not one of my top values. It's still a value because it's important to me, but it's not one of my top values. So remember, when we do this exercise, I'm not asking you to figure out everything that's important to you. It's about figuring out what the most important things are to you. And for me, the ideal number of values to have is between 5 and 10. And I have about 6. Now, technically, you could break mine down and say I've got a few more. For example, I've grouped mine like travel and adventure. You could technically class that as 2. Health and well-being, family and close friends. But even if you were to split my values into bits like travel, adventure, health, well-being, family, close friends, self-improvement, freedom and competition, I'd still only have 9 values. So I'd still be within the 5 to 10. But I still class this as 6 values for me because things like travel and adventure I group as 1. Although they are slightly different, it's one of the same thing to me. Same as health and well-being, and likewise family and close friends. Family and close friends are technically slightly different, but I see my close friends as family anyway, and so to me it's 1 value. So the question now is, how do you establish what they are for you? We're going to do an exercise now to help you figure out what your values are. So I want you to have a 10 to 15 minute brainstorming session writing down everything you can think of that is in any way important to you in your life. I know I've just said that the ideal number of top values is 5 to 10, but at this stage, I don't want you to think in terms of your top values. I literally want you to write down everything that you can think of that is in any way important to you in your life. I don't care if you end up with 20, 50, 100 or 500 things, just write them all down in 10 to 15 minutes, everything that is important to you in your life. And in order to do this exercise properly, it might help to ask yourself a couple of questions. So you can think about things like, when were you happiest? What were you doing and why were you happy? Other than your most basic human needs, what must you have in your life to experience fulfillment? What has given your life meaning and purpose, both in the past and present? And it might also help to think in terms of any incredible experiences that you've had that really stand out, and think about what values you were exercising during those experiences. And this actually helped me to figure out some of my values, because this might sound ridiculous, but I've been on nights out before, which I've not really enjoyed very much, and I've been on some nights out that have just been unbelievable. Every now and then I've had a night out where I've just absolutely loved it. And I don't just mean a good night out, I've had loads of good nights out. I'm talking about a handful of nights where I've honestly just thought, that's a night I am never, ever going to forget. Now, of course, some of these nights, there's always other factors involved as to why you've enjoyed it so much, but I figured out that one aspect of it, one common denominator with these few small handful of nights that I've enjoyed at an unbelievable level, the common denominator has been adventure. It's felt like an adventure, and I feel like I've been on an adventure. So it is a useful exercise to think about all the incredible experiences that you've had, and to think about what values were being exercised during those experiences. And on the contrary, you can also think about any bad times you had when you felt angry or frustrated or depressed, and think about what the reasons for that were. Why did you feel angry, frustrated and down? What values were being denied? For example, when I think of some of my bad times, I unfortunately think of some parts of my marriage. Now, some of my marriage was absolutely fantastic, but some of my marriage wasn't, which is why it ended in divorce. But when I think about the bad times in terms of my marriage, and when I felt really frustrated and down, one of the things that was being denied was family and close friends, because I was in a relationship where I wasn't able to see my family and close friends and have the relationship with my family and close friends that I wanted to. And so that was dragging my happiness down, because I wasn't able to fulfill that value, that thing that was very important to me. So in that example, my value of family and close friends was being denied. Now that you have your list of values, it might be that you have way more than 10. Well, if that's the case, what we can do now is to think about whether you can group any of your values into an overall core value. So for example, maybe you've written down values like growing, learning, and developing, and if you think about it, all three of those could be grouped into one value called self-improvement. To give you another example, maybe you've got things like honesty, transparency, and truthfulness written down. All three of those could be grouped into a core value called integrity. To give you a personal example, when I would do this kind of exercise myself, I might have things like holidays, beaches, coastal walks, hikes, being in the countryside, and skiing written down. And of course, all of those things can be grouped into one core value, which I eventually called travel and adventure. So once you've done that and you've come up with your core values, if you still have more than 10, what I'd then do is just narrow them down so that you've got a list of your top 5 to 10 values. Minimum 5, maximum 10. Because remember, the purpose of this whole exercise is to come up with your top values. Not just all your values, but your top 5 to 10 core values that you can then use as a guide and compass for your life. And as a final check over your values, it's good to think to yourself, do these values make you feel good about yourself? Are you proud of your top values? Do they reflect who you really are and what is most important to you in your life? Would you stay true to these values even if it wasn't necessarily popular and put you in the minority? And the last thing I'll say on this for now is just to bear in mind that you may tweak and change your values over time, and that's okay if it feels right to you. You'll probably find that if you've done it properly, most of your values probably will stay fairly consistent over your whole life. But as I said, it's not totally out there to occasionally change and tweak them. And it's probably going to most commonly happen not because you yourself have fundamentally changed, although that can happen, but it's more commonly going to happen because you actually realise that something you've written down maybe wasn't as important to you as you originally thought. And maybe something that you didn't think was very important to you is actually more important to you than you actually thought. So the point is, don't be afraid to tweak and change your values over time, as you may change, but in particular if you realise that actually you've made a bit of a mistake and you should have included something that you didn't, or that you've got something on there that's a value that actually it is important to you, but it's not as important as you thought it was. So as long as it feels right to you, feel free to tweak and change them over time, but hopefully once you've done this exercise properly, you'll now have your list of your top 5 to 10 values.